So apparently Joe Rogan has the most popular podcast on Spotify, and he's repeatedly spread COVID misinformation and invited guests on to do the same.
Went from Walter Cronkite, basically, to this guy Joe Rogan, who believes in dragons. I checked it. He believes in dragons. He believes in dragons.
Did you triple source that?
Yes, I did. And he also thinks that dragons, like I guess like dinosaur type of animals, roamed the earth when people did.
Worried about losing your job, and you're worried about podcasts taking over, and who's the source of news, and we said Donald Trump was Hitler, but half the country disagreed with us, and he won, and this is and Joe Rogan believes in dragons.
Joe Rogan was going about his usual routine when The View crossed a line it couldn't undo. What started as a cheap jab quickly turned into a full-blown media clash that sent shockwaves through daytime television. The turning point came when Joy Behar smirked on national TV and brushed Rogan off with a sneer. "Trust us," she said. "We're backed by ABC News, unlike Joe Rogan, who believes in dragons." The audience laughed, the hosts moved on, but behind the scenes, the countdown had already begun. Rogan didn't explode on social media or fire off passive-aggressive tweets. He didn't play the outrage game. Instead, he answered in the only way that really counts, with the law. A $100 million defamation lawsuit hit like a wrecking ball, tearing through the entertainment world with subpoenas instead of sound bites. This wasn't symbolic. It wasn't a bluff. It was a careful, evidence-loaded legal move. Rogan's legal team accused The View of reckless and defamatory broadcasting.
That's why people like our show, because they know that we are checked by ABC News. But
We're checked by everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if we're wrong, we have, the legal note here.
The human legal.
I don't know. Hey, this is the most important part. This is right after she was saying, we are run by ABC News. You should trust us, not Joe Rogan, who believes in dragons. So she by saying we should trust them because they're double checked by ABC News, and then making the stupidest statement. Like you didn't listen to what I said. Yeah. You didn't listen to what the wildlife biologist, and that's only a part of what he said.
I can't believe
the other
Joy
part of what he
Behar
said was there was something before that where he was explaining encounters with giant reptiles.
If you like that takedown, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Suddenly, the chatter didn't sound so casual anymore. Every word spoken on that set started to feel like potential evidence. The jokes weren't jokes now, they were liabilities. Goldberg sat rigid as applause gave way to a new phrase: legal exposure. Sonny Hostin's confidence cracked the moment the lawsuit hit national headlines. What used to be a routine of smug commentary instantly became a full-blown legal crisis. This wasn't a vague claim buried in paperwork. The complaint was detailed: episodes, timestamps, direct quotes. Every time Rogan's name was dragged without factual support, it was spelled out in black and white. While Joy Behar waved it off with eye rolls and sarcasm, Rogan was doing the opposite. He wasn't posturing, he wasn't reacting. He was gathering proof, transcripts, video clips, and archived broadcasts. He didn't escalate emotionally. He escalated carefully. His legal team made the core arguments simple. These weren't framed as opinions. They were presented as facts to a massive audience. And in court, that difference is everything. Free speech doesn't protect reckless broadcasting once it crosses into defamation. ABC wasn't ready. Executives scrambled behind closed doors, replaying footage they never thought would face legal scrutiny. Hours of tape were reviewed with one question hanging over every meeting: how did it get this far? Online, the backlash erupted. Dragon Believer was suddenly everywhere.
That show has this very specific ideological bubble in which they operate in, and they always bring on a token conservative woman, and they yell over her and silence her, and they did that with Meghan McCain, and they did that with what is that other blonde woman from Survivor? Do you remember her, Jamie? She was always yelling. I mean, it's a bizarre show.
And instead of backing down, Rogan leaned into it, turning mockery into strategy and ridicule into leverage. Free speech doesn't shield reckless broadcasting when it crosses into defamation. ABC wasn't prepared. Executives scrambled behind closed doors, replaying footage they never imagined would face legal scrutiny. Hours of tape were reviewed with one question on everyone's mind: how did it get this far? Online, the backlash exploded. Dragon Believer was trending everywhere. What had been intended as a throwaway joke became one of the costliest mistakes in daytime television history. A $100 million lawsuit doesn't whisper, it crashes through an entire industry. Even longtime viewers of The View were caught off guard. Years of smug dismissal suddenly came due. For once, the hosts weren't controlling the narrative. Joe Rogan wasn't furious or theatrical. He was methodical. On his podcast, he calmly walked through the claims made about him, playing the clips in full and showing exactly how his words had been twisted. No shouting, no dramatics, just context. And that was the problem for The View. The footage was public. Millions had already seen the segment, laughed at the punchline, and absorbed the implication that Rogan was reckless or out of touch. That perception now became central to the case. Rogan's attorneys were clear. This wasn't a simple disagreement. It was a consistent pattern of accusations presented as fact to a massive audience, claims that could and did damage reputations. The consequences followed fast. Sponsors grew uneasy. Brands pulled back. Inside ABC, producers and lawyers huddled behind closed doors, trying to manage a situation that had already escaped containment.
People want us divided, and they aren't just here in this country. They're foreign adversaries who are infiltrating our social media because it is prudent for us to stay that way. So when you see something that really pisses you off, you should triple check that one.
The bad information that's going out there.
Well, in defense, there are some really
But
good
it's possible that Donald Trump did roam the earth when dinosaurs were here.
There are some really good news kind of influencer types, and I think it's great that they're getting information about global and current events in front of younger people who maybe don't tune into traditional media. But to Sarah's point, there has to be some fact-checking and actually verification of the things that are shared, because I spend a lot of time on Instagram Reels, and I'm served up things that I get outraged about, and then I realize, oh, that's not even...
One insider put it bluntly, this was never meant to leave the studio, but it had. And once the lawsuit was filed, there was no turning back. Rogan's team delivered a detailed report, statement by statement, line by line, showing exactly where the show had crossed the line. Supporters rallied. Critics paused. Even people who had never liked Rogan began asking the same question. Had The View finally gone too far? The answer was simple. Yes. Now the media had to decide how to frame it. Scandal, culture war, or the inevitable result of unchecked arrogance. Years of treating opposing voices as punchlines had finally caught up. What The View had brushed off for decades was now staring back as a legal problem it couldn't laugh off. ABC's legal team went into full emergency mode. Urgent meetings, non-stop calls, transcripts marked and remarked. This wasn't another ratings controversy. This was litigation, and Joe Rogan had forced the issue. On air, the hosts tried to maintain their routine, but tension leaked through every segment. Whoopi Goldberg looked distracted, her usual authority slipping. Sunny Hostin clung to her notes. Joy Behar tossed out jokes, but none landed. Behind the scenes, producers reportedly panicked. Don't say his name. Don't reference the joke. Don't make it worse. It didn't matter. The damage was already spreading. Rogan played the clip on his podcast. He let it run, then stopped it and asked one quiet question. This is journalism? That was it. No rant, no outrage, just their words replayed without commentary. The moment went viral instantly. Millions watched as the attack collapsed under its own weight. The laughter shifted. People weren't laughing with The View anymore, they were laughing at it. Even comedians jumped in, parodying the situation and exposing how weak the original joke had been. As the pressure mounted, the show's tone changed. Suddenly, it became about opinions, free speech, and context, arguments that had only appeared after the lawsuit landed. But courts don't care about convenient rewrites. Rogan's legal team was clear. This wasn't about silencing anyone. It was about accountability. A show that blurred the line between entertainment and accusation, then hid behind laughter when challenged. And that distinction mattered far more than the hosts realized. In television, tone can blur responsibility, but it doesn't erase it.
You know, just let's look at a scenario where the Supreme Court says, yes, he has all those rights. He is immune from everything.
Yeah.
You know what Joe Biden could do since he is presently president?
What?
Whoa. He could throw every Republican in jail.
Do you see what Whoopi Goldberg said?
What'd she say?
Whoopi Goldberg said that Biden could arrest all the Republicans and put them in jail. You just need to see how unhinged this kind of thinking is. Well, you know what Joe Biden could do? Joe Biden, you have to see it.
But in court, intent and impact are dissected frame by frame. What had been dismissed as humor was now frozen in transcripts, stripped of laughter and context, and judged only by what was said and how it was presented. Inside the network, the fear went beyond legal, it was structural. If this case went to trial, every past segment became fair game. Every offhand remark, sarcastic jab, or moment where authority was implied without evidence risked exposure. Lawyers weren't just defending a single episode anymore. They were auditing years of behavior. On camera, the change was subtle but undeniable. Conversations softened, language tightened, confidence gave way to caution. The show that once thrived on dominance now sounded rehearsed and restrained, as if every sentence had been filtered through a legal lens before reaching viewers. For years, The View had faced accusations of bullying guests, especially those outside the panel's worldview. Now, the dynamic flipped. The show wasn't controlling the room, it was defending itself, and poorly. A former guest summed it up bluntly: the on-camera sisterhood vanished once the lights went off. Behind the scenes, it was competitive, hostile, and unforgiving. That quote spread quickly, fueling an already tense situation. Other outlets stepped in, treating the lawsuit less like gossip and more like a stress test for broadcast standards. Analysts called it a potential turning point, one that could force networks to confront the line between commentary and accusation. Public reaction was divided, but attention surged. Rogan's podcast numbers climbed, The View's ratings slipped, and advertisers noticed immediately. This wasn't just about optics anymore, it was about exposure. Brands didn't want their logos near a show facing a 9-figure legal threat. Contracts were quietly paused, statements grew vague, silence replaced confidence. Viewers began resurfacing old clips, pointing out other moments where claims were made without evidence. The narrative shifted. This wasn't a one-off mistake, it looked like a pattern. Legal experts warned a trial would be brutal. On air, the strain was obvious. Jokes fell flat, confidence drained. Authority now sounded defensive. And the pressure didn't stop at commentary. Inside the network, concern shifted from damage control to containment. Executives weren't asking how to spin the story anymore. They were asking what else might surface if the case moved forward. Every past segment now looked like a potential liability audit waiting to happen. The hosts felt it. Conversations slowed. Statements became measured. The confidence that once defined the show gave way to hesitation.
I agree that Joe Rogan is a horror. A horror.
I mean, I'm not saying that Joe Rogan should be removed from Spotify. He's got 11 million listeners. He's got $100 million, contract as of 2020. But I do think as the podcast platform, you have to have some sort of guidelines. How about a disclaimer on his podcast that says, this is...
Viewers noticed the rhythm had changed. The dominance was gone. What remained was a panel trying to sound certain while clearly unsure where the next line might land. Meanwhile, Rogan stayed deliberately out of the spotlight. He didn't escalate the rhetoric. He didn't personalize the fight. He let the contrast speak for itself, one side scrambling to explain intent, the other standing on record and documentation. By that point, the story had moved beyond personalities. It wasn't about liking or disliking Rogan or agreeing with his views. It was about whether a long-running show had confused authority with immunity, and whether it could keep doing so without consequences. That question hung over every broadcast, and the longer it went unanswered, the harder it became to ignore. Routine conversations now felt risky. Every sentence sounded pre-approved by lawyers. What once passed as confident commentary came out cautious and stiff. Inside ABC, leadership faced an uncomfortable truth. The View wasn't just controversial anymore, it was a legal liability. Anxiety ran high up the ladder. Executives at Disney, ABC's parent company, were reportedly furious that a show built for daytime chatter had triggered a 9-figure lawsuit involving Joe Rogan, one of the biggest independent media figures on the planet. Internal guidance followed fast. Vet segments, avoid references, and eliminate anything that could be construed as a personal accusation. Confidence gave way to retreat. Staff described a workplace on edge, where nothing felt spontaneous anymore. Meanwhile, Rogan kept moving forward. His legal team released a detailed breakdown of the case. Every disputed statement, every misleading claim, and every broadcast moment frozen in documentation. Online, the response accelerated. Clips of mockery resurfaced, now paired with legal analysis and commentary. The message was clear. Sarcasm doesn't hold up in court, evidence does. Rogan himself stayed measured. No tirades, no emotional appeals. He replayed the footage, laid out the facts, and let the audience draw its own conclusions. That restraint carried weight, making the contrast unavoidable. The fallout spread beyond headlines. Sponsors quietly exited. No brand wanted to be near a show facing serious legal scrutiny. Producers tried softening the tone, pivoting to lighter topics, but it felt forced. Viewers weren't interested in small talk anymore. The question of accountability was already in the room, and once that question is public, it doesn't disappear just because the show tries to change the subject. On set, the shift was obvious. Applause sounded thinner, reactions lagged. Even the studio audience seemed unsure when to laugh. A show built on confidence now moved like it was waiting for permission to speak. That hesitation bled through the screen. Behind the curtain, contingency plans quietly formed. Legal teams mapped scenarios. Executives discussed risk thresholds. The question wasn't whether the lawsuit was inconvenient. It was how much more damage could follow if Discovery opened doors nobody wanted opened. And still, Rogan didn't blink.
Why doesn't The View have any trans women on it?
Great point. It has a lot of women that look trans, but none of them... It has a lot of second and third takes. After a drink, you'd go, huh? But it doesn't have a ton of...
He didn't frame the fight as personal. He framed it as facts versus claims, records versus rhetoric. Every time the footage was replayed, the contrast grew sharper. One side leaned on tone and authority, the other leaned on documentation. Attempts to pivot the show toward lighter segments fell flat. Viewers weren't buying the reset. Once trust erodes, soft topics don't rebuild it, they only highlight avoidance. The audience noticed, and so did advertisers. What had started as an offhand jab had now reshaped the atmosphere of an entire network property. Even the studio audience felt it. Applause came late, laughter sounded forced. A show built on momentum now moved cautiously, as if every reaction might end up in a courtroom. The View wasn't just struggling with optics anymore, it was losing authority. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan gained ground without changing his approach. His podcast surged to the top of global charts after he laid out the case in plain terms. Clips, context, and documentation. No press tour, no spin. Just the record, played back in full. Commentators across the spectrum weighed in. Some framed it as a reckoning for legacy media. Others saw it as a warning shot, proof that size and platform don't grant immunity. Either way, the story wasn't fading, it was expanding. When asked if he planned to settle, Rogan's reply was brief: "Let's see what the truth brings." That line spread fast. Newsrooms understood what it meant. This wasn't about a payout, it was about precedent. The show's response came late and was carefully worded. Vague denials, ongoing reviews, no specifics. By then, it didn't matter. Too many clips were circulating. Too many contradictions were documented. Even longtime supporters started questioning whether the show had finally crossed a line it couldn't defend. Inside ABC, the conversation turned serious. Options that once seemed unthinkable were quietly discussed. Reshuffling hosts, structural changes, even whether the format itself had become more risk than reward. Disney, the parent company, wasn't concerned with ideology. It was concerned with exposure.